Thank you again for joining us. You are attending AGB, our Emerging Trends in Security webinar, where we will be talking about trends in security and solutions that we are offering, as well as the trends. So just to give you a bit of a background on who AGB is. AGB began in April of 2001. We've been an established company for about 17 years, and as a full-service security firm right here in Chicago. We are a state-of-the-art business intelligence and technology company coupled with physical security. But some of our core services are guard and patrol, corporate security, training, drone surveillance, fingerprinting and background checks, as well as cybersecurity. But we will be focusing mainly on training and technology today. As you can see, we are a well-awarded and well-known business within the Chicagoland area as well as nationwide. We are the only African-American security company in the nation to receive ISO 9001-2015 certification. And we are the largest SSA special service area provider in the city of Chicago, as well as largest security contractor for the Chicago Housing Authority as well. We take pride in that, as we've seen crime decrease by 90% for the Chicago Housing Authority. And Goldman Sachs has also awarded us as for the Small Business Growth Award. So we will be addressing our technology first, and we will pass the mic over to Arba Holden, our Chief Operations Officer, where he will speak about the emerging trends in technology in security.
Good afternoon, thank you. AGB is pivoting towards security consulting, and in that pivot, we're learning that not only training has become a staple point for us, but understanding our clients' needs in other areas such as cybersecurity. And in the cyber world, we know that many customers, or many victims in this case, are victims to crimes that occur over social media. And we believe that social media is somewhat like a gateway to cybercrime because of its reach. Social media can exponentially increase threats and potential, and increases threat potential simply using a share. So shares allows individuals to expose others who are trusting Facebook or other social media sites to their networks, which further permeates bad information or cyber threats throughout the systems of Facebook and Instagram and Snap. And so it's important for customers to know what is violating that area. So AGB is poised to help customers watch for threats that threaten their asset, which is their brand, and monitor it in a very proactive way. What we've learned over time is that there's been a 22 or 23% increase in threats overall over social media. And what we typically want folks to understand is that there's a heavy cost to managing cyber threats. And that cost is averaging somewhere around $300,000. And companies are typically not in a position to recover from something like that, as you know, we don't go into the year budgeting for high-level risks that could result in such an expense. Social media spans the globe from surface web activity around Google, Bing, Wikipedia, again, those social media areas, and deep into the web, where it deals with your personal information, legal documents, medical records, finance information, government records. But it even goes even deeper to where now crime that would occur in our eyes are now being transacted in the dark web. And in that space, we're finding that individuals are taking the opportunity to hide behind technology to make transactions that would normally be done on the street. Because of the internet, threats spread really fast. As I mentioned earlier, you know, a simple share can exponentially increase reach threat could have through the internet. Differently from on the street when you pass leaflets or having conversations with individuals, they were less likely to trust you. However, we're finding that individuals over the web are easily trusting, and they're simply replacing traditional news media for things like Facebook and Instagram. AGB is also pivoting towards expanding our ability to surveil. And what we've explored over the last year is the ability to do surveillance via drone. You're seeing today with all of the national disasters that drones have become very prevalent in overseeing the lay of the land, that natural disasters have, how it has destroyed areas. And because of the terrain, emergency crews were unable to really survey the land to determine damage now or rescue victims. But now they're using drones to find the real damage that's been done to areas, as well as to find individuals who they ordinarily would take some time to get to as a result of drones. So AGB is using drones in a way that helps us take a look at crowds when crowd control is necessary. AGB is also using drones to do reconnaissance. When we are about to deploy to a high threat area, we can send our drone to that area and get a determination of what the threat is, what the how we would need to deploy to that area, and we can do live feeds back to our operating centers, showing our teams what the terrain looks like in order for us to deploy a crew. So drones have become really significant to us. We have 2 certified FAA pilots. We have 3 operational drones that are capable of flying up to 4 miles and covering areas where we couldn't ordinarily cover, on feet and line of sight. And so our customers are becoming really, really interested in our drone technology.
Thanks, Arba. So now we're going to pass it over to our Chief Training Officer, Johnny Tyler, where he'll speak about workforce de-escalation, trends, and security.
So thank you, Tafar. So today, as we know, there's a lot of national dialogue and conversation around school shootings. Just this past Monday, we had a solidarity where schools, grammar schools, middle schools from across the high schools even, from across the nation walked out to support the idea that schools need to be safe. And so because of the attention that schools get, and rightly so, since they're 22% of the active shooting that's taken place in our public domain, the other silent reality that doesn't get as much attention is the fact that 44% of these incidences are occurring in commerce, that is in businesses and workplaces. And so workforce de-escalation is very important. And in order to address this, we must consider several things. One, that it's a very costly venture. It's costing capitalists lots of money. And so for this, employers and business owners want to be cognizant of actions that they can take. So you want to consider certain behavior that may be prevalent in the workplace. For an example, when you see individuals that have the spirit of bullying or intimidating behavior, paranoia, or often causing conflict with others, there's typically an obsession with weapons, and you can see this in their conversations. And if you follow social media, oftentimes they'll post certain things on social media. They may even have pictures of them with weapons, speaking of them. And if you're noticing changes in behavior, habits that, for an example, grooming, being on time, and things like that start to deteriorate, then you're noticing significant change in the behavior. These are often telltale signs that these or other individuals with this behavior may be going through something that you want to pay attention to. There's more discussion on personal problems that they have. Some individuals have a natural antisocial behavior. They're called isolates. They tend to be to themselves. And the nature of an isolate does not suggest in itself a challenge, but it could. And especially if someone who was once very extroverted or very much cordial with their coworkers, all of a sudden results to an antisocial attitude or behavior, or someone who has a short fuse, more likely to become more argumentative than being really uh, focused on solution solving or resolutions to issues. These are telltale signs. So you want to be able to take action. Now, taking action does not always mean it comes after the fact. A person should have a plan if something occurs. You do want to look at what your security protocol is. You should have a stylized implementation of a security protocol. AGB right now, we are establishing relationships with many public companies that are looking to have its workforce, and especially its security officers, design a plan in case of a challenge of active shooter or escalated violent behavior in the workplace. This includes being aware of surroundings, knowing how to observe things that are out of place, being more aware of individuals that are coming into your space. Then you also you can get in front of issues by having a mediation policy. If there's an issue or something happens, you can address it, and you should address it rapidly. We just did an exercise where we found that if you take 5 minutes to sit down with an employee who may have an issue that you may think or may otherwise consider insignificant, you often find that there's some other underlying issues that happen, and this can be addressed through a robust employee assistance program. Oftentimes, there are things that are happening in the individual's life that you may not be aware of, the employer that is, and it could be the death of a loved one. They could be going through a marital challenge. They could have other. So those are the types of things that can cause individual behavior to. So when an employee exhibits such behavior, you want to remember that you're not targeting the person, but the problem or the behavior itself. So you should be able to also log if you're keeping a track record of incidents, then you also are cataloging what could be a potential problem, and you want to get in front of that. So it is important though to remember not to assume that everyone who has a bad day is going to become violent. So you don't want to get paranoid in this situation, but you do want to be proactive in terms of understanding the climate and the attitude of our society today, and be very proactive in having a plan in place to prevent, intervene, and also to address after an event occurs.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. So next, we'll address active shooters, scenarios, trends, as well as solutions. We have on the phone Sam Pwang as well as Liddell Wise, AGB security expert.
Thank you, Tafir. So basically, what's happening currently in trends of active shooter cases, when you're starting to look at the percentages and breakdown, you're looking at places of commerce, which is very high. Schools we always hear on the news, but what the reality is with school shootings, it's not the primary piece, because if you really look at the hard stats, it's only 23%. And not that 23% is downplayed, but let's put everything into perspective. Open space is another piece, which is 11%, and as an aggregate, 22% which is all the small pieces that are adding in from government property that are non-military, residents, houses of worship, military properties, and healthcare facilities have suffered some of these instances with active shooters. Now, if you look at the FBI statistics of active shooters, the average response time or the active shooter act is 5 minutes, and the active shooter response time from law enforcement to engage is 18 minutes. So there's a large disparity of what's occurring between a event that actually has happened and a response to neutralize that threat. The larger piece of it is that the larger the facility, the longer it takes for law enforcement to respond to the event, due to the fact that they're trying to locate what the active shooter is. They're also going through and searching every premise as they're navigating through. And the case in point is that when you look at Las Vegas and the recent shootings with Mandalay Bay, that was 10 minutes shooting, and the police response time was 1 hour and 15 minutes due to the magnitude and the size of that building. When you look at what's the training that's currently given out there, majority of corporations and schools and whatnot are utilizing the Department of Homeland Security active shooter training. Their training focuses on running, hiding, and fighting, and that covers 90% of what should be done. What people fail to recognize is that the first responders' duties when they arrive is one thing. Their one thing is to neutralize the threat, not triage and handle folks that are injured on scene. You could be mortally wounded and dying. They will just step over you and continue to engage the threat. That is their primary focus. And I think when you put this into perspective, because at AGB we look at, you know, what's actually the protocol and what is something that we bring that's unique. You know, the other aspect is arming teachers, and that's one of the fallacies. When you look at arming teachers in this model of de-escalation and protection and mitigating active shooter threats, the issue is that teachers do one thing: they're educators, right? And so when you put teachers that are armed, that's the same basis as citizens that are armed with a typical carry conceal permit. They're only there to protect their immediate self and maybe their immediate surroundings. That's it. Their job isn't to provide security or anything else. When you look at school resource officers and having those folks on site, those are not your folks that are on there that's actively engaging threats, because they're handling other school issues as well. So when people say, well, you know, law enforcement will get there in time, well, as you're seeing these trends happen with budgetary issues in municipalities, law enforcement resources are just stretched that it just can't happen. So what is the actual piece of it that can mitigate these shootings, both in a commerce setting and as well as in institutions of higher learning? The only option that you have is having private armed security on campus or at the location of business, due to the fact that they're already there. They serve one purpose. Their job isn't to engage with the students. Their main job is to keep the premise safe. And this is the part where LaSalle can go further into the active shooter training, and it's just a breakdown of what we do.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Basically, AGB's active shooter training that we conduct is not just about PowerPoint presentations. Since we realized with the secret to our successful training programs is always classroom with a little bit of hands-on scenario-based training. We utilize a bunch of different stress inoculation methods that go along with our training, to where we utilize simulation training. So the fear and the adrenaline rush is in real and continuously practiced until the participants can understand the full concepts of the actual event. That way they're being put in it mentally and also too physically. And we training them to a point to where they can actually practice these things to where it becomes an automated response for them. Active shooter training is not just about sheltering in place. You know, there's strategies behind it to overcome, survive, and win against the attacker. Some of those important things, you know, that we mentioned earlier that Sam was just talking about, the importance of medical training in the event of an active shooter attack. Medical training from basics all the way through advanced, including tactical combat casualty care, and some other things that have been actually utilized in those kind of mass casualty situations that have actually kept people within that golden hour, so that way the survivability rate is actually up. Being proactive training for on-site staff and equipped with basic life-saving equipment in designated safe zones and safe areas. So that way that triage can be began prior to the EMS emergency services style people or first responders getting there on scene. The uses of armed guards on the premises. That's, you know, some of the different advantages and stuff that our training programs actually highlight. The different types of services, armed escort for the field service employees, such as public utility workers. We also have static armed guard training that also is a deterrent, as well as, like you said, an additive to the resource officers that might be on some of these sites if we're talking about schools or even businesses. Roving armed guards as well. The training that these guards receive is beyond advanced, so the level of being able to counter that mass shooter and also to preserve life on scene. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sal. Did you have anything else? I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
Thank you so much. So we are going to go over, if you have any, feel free, if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to ask them in our Q&A bar icon right above. We will pass it right back to our COO, Arba Holden, as he speaks about security trends, facility security, or otherwise known as field security.
So at AGB, we have experienced a lot of for protecting those who are out in the cities who are providing utility services. So an individual that works for a utility company might come to your house, install some equipment outside or service some equipment outside, and maybe your home is in an area where may have a high threat of crime in that area, or an individual could be anywhere servicing equipment that is general and used to an area and have the same kinds of issues. We most notably have been hearing on the news where delivery people, such as FedEx and the United States Postal Service even, their drivers are experiencing either robbery or in the middle of some outbreak that will occur. We're hearing from our clients now is that they want their staffs protected. Not only do they want them protected, they want them trained in what to do on their own, how to, how to observe, how to protect themselves while they're there. So AGB has a service that has been developed and is being deployed for several key clients, in which we call field security worker security and field service worker security. I apologize. Field service worker security. And in this service, we have designed chaperone service, grid service, as well as rover service. So in our chaperone service, we will, as the word states, we will chaperone individuals to their location and stay with them while they do the work that they've been deployed to do. In our grid service, we will strategically design a patrol in the area around a response time that our clients indicate that we should respond. And in our rover service, we'll be backing up our grid and our chaperone patrol, ensuring that if additional resources are necessary, we would have them in the location that the service workers are working. And so we're getting a lot of interest from companies who deploy a lot of field service workers out into the urban areas where they're finding themselves in street battles, in the middle of street battles, not even personal attacks on them, but just things that are occurring in the neighborhoods where they work. You know, the residents still need their services. So if nothing but taking the service worker out of the equation and denying their clients for service, the utility companies and the service companies are asking AGB to protect their workers so they can continue to deliver the high degree of service, high quality of service that they have been doing without the threat. The next thing we want to talk about is we're doing integrated security. Integrated guard security is another emerging security service that is we're finding and doing the accounts that we're working on. And what integrated guard security is the convergence of things that typically were sold individually in the past. In the past, people were accustomed to buying security cameras for their location, and then those cameras were then monitored. Today, the integrated guard services that we're offering combines all three of those for our clients, in that it adds the on-site guard patrol, because AGB typically guards large commercial properties, large rental properties, and large government agencies. And so in the ability to protect these locations or these facilities in a 360-degree fashion, we have to have eyes everywhere and the ability to respond. And so having eyes via camera and having dispatch who is reviewing that footage and being able to coordinate guard response is really important, and it gives us 3 points of entry, 3 points of eyes on a situation that otherwise we would not have the level of intelligence that an integrated guard solution provides.
Thank you, Arba. We have just a couple of questions that we wanted to answer. Again, feel free to tune in and ask your questions at the toolbar above, or any thoughts that you may have on the subject. But our first question is AGB capable of supplying, I guess, medical training? Is that a service that we provide, medical training? And if so, can you speak to it?
Absolutely. We do offer the level of training, and like Littell had, that we give the actual combat casualty care piece of the training, which is the same level of care that folks that are in the armed services and federal agencies that deploy. This is your basic combat lifesavers course.
Hold on, could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I believe that was Sam, but you were having some technical difficulties. You seem to be a bit muffled. So if you could repeat that, I don't know if you need to get in a better area. Sorry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do give
a little bit muffled.
That style of medical training. Are you?
It's still a bit muffled. Is Littell able to answer?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me good?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What he's saying is basically we do offer the medical training. We do, like I said, everything from basic first aid, CPR, AED style type stuff, all the way up through tactical combat casualty care. We do certify in all of those as well, because like you said, that is a very vast and important part, especially when we're talking about triage or just mass casualty care. This is a very important piece of the training, as also too for civilians and also to our armed guard personnel, so that way everybody is familiar with some form of life-saving capability, so that way life can be preserved as much as possible. Was that answer that question? Yes.
Yep. Thank you so much. And we have one more question in regards to a custom program for active shooters. So are you able to customize an active shooter program for an organization, and how soon can you do so?
Yes, we can. We can customize our active shooter program, basically developing each individual entity their own separate kind of active shooter plan. We utilize a bunch of different series of things that fit basically the criteria of their particular entity or business, so that way they can actually be employed and actually utilize the actual systems and some of the tools we put in place. They'll be able to fit into that particular business's plan and emergency response to it.
Well, we would like to thank everyone for joining today. We will email this presentation out to everyone, and we will also have the live recording via video YouTube that we can email the link as well. But we will feel free to stay in touch. You can reach us at agbinvestigative.com if you should have any other questions. And our phone number is 773-445-2300. And again, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry, 2300. 4300, I'm sorry. So, okay, 773-445-4300. And that will be updated in the email that we send out to you. But thanks again for joining us and have a great weekend.